Okay, let's go ahead.
So we're here today with Mike. I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to.
Absolutely. I'm Mike McClusky. I've been a lifelong resident of Dartmouth. Lived here for 60 years. I'm the son of Gloria McClusky, I think, as everybody knows. I used to swim at the Shannon Park Pool. That's where I learned to swim. I was on the Shannon Sharks, the swim team, so I'm very used to this area. I was in the military for 16 years.
Okay. Did you live here then?
No. I lived on the West Coast for a while.
Okay.
And so when I joined, I was in for 16 years. I got out as a lieutenant commander. Couldn't go to sea anymore. So then I went on and I started getting into adult education and training. And I'm a great believer in that you can always help people achieve more. And you can always help people do what they want to do. And I think that's the main role of counselors, to help you be successful. And that's what I mean, is whatever you think you need, it's not my job to say, well, that's not for us. It's for you to decide and for me to help support you.
Okay, that's very good.
Thank you.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a few questions.
Of course.
First of all, what do you see is the main problem with the housing crisis? I like to call it a housing emergency, actually.
Oh, it is.
Much more than a crisis.
Yep.
What do you think is the direct result here at Ocean Breeze that's affecting so many of us?
That's a really good point. And, I do want to say that the worst thing that could happen, and I apologize to everyone, is to lose your community. This is terrible when you lose your community. And, there's a sense of belonging, a sense of safety when you know everybody and you know what's going on. I think what's happened is we do need more density. There's no denying we need more density. Dartmouth is kind of an older place. It's got a lot of older homes. But what we need to do is we need to have density where it makes sense.
Right.
So places like Micmac Mall, Penhorn, those areas where, as we were speaking earlier, where the spider webs of Dartmouth, the main arteries and main thoroughfares cross, that's where you want density. Down by the bridgehead, perfect place, Dartmouth Shopping Center, everything like that. So what we're doing is we're rushing towards density and really hurting people that have lived here for a very long time. So really, there should have been a plan for what happens to the 400 families, I'll say that because it's 400 units, what happens to them while we rush towards building luxury housing. And quite frankly, your spot is beautiful. We were talking about it. Living by the water, having a forest. Oh my God, it's wonderful. I live on Victoria Road, so I'm used to 10,000 cars a day zooming by my home. And, I do want to say that too. I'm a renter, just like you folks are renters. I don't own property, so I know what it's like to feel housing insecure. Now, luckily, my landlord is my mother, so I don't think she's going to be kicking me out anytime soon. But, when my mom passes, right, I will be on the rental market just like you folks are. And so I think that in the rush to build density, and I think council is trying to do the right thing, but they're making up, as you and I spoke about, for decades of inaction. And really, we should have been building housing 30 years ago. But there was this feeling that Nova Scotia wasn't going to grow. It was going to be this quiet little hamlet forever. But money flows wherever there's an ability to make money. And that's why money's flowing into Halifax now to build these condos or high rent apartments, because that's where they can make money. And again, as we were saying, none of us probably watching this video or me making this video, I will not be able to afford to live in these apartments. These are not for me. No, that's absolutely.
So if you were in council today,
yep,
what would you bring forth? What would you do to help Ocean Breeze residents today?
Wow, that's tough, and I'll be honest, that's very difficult. What should have happened was, I know Acorn has proposed that there be a rule that when you build housing like this, building the towers and tearing your houses down, there should be existing housing you can go into. And to make that a bylaw, that if you're tearing down so many units, there has to be this many units to go in. And I know the worst thing is you all have uncertainty. Like you were saying, or the idea of coming home and finding a letter in your mailbox and suddenly you're out. And that's terrible. And what should have happened is, if this is going to happen, which I would not have supported, I would not have allowed this to be rezoned the way it is, I would not have allowed them to tear all your homes down. I'm only one vote, and that is another thing. I will do what I can, is there should have been a staged plan that said, this will happen on this date, this will happen on this date, because humans can put up with a lot of stuff, but uncertainty is the worst feeling. You get a medical diagnosis, while you're waiting is the worst feeling you can have, right? When you're sitting, am I sick, am I not sick? And if you are, you go, now I can deal with it, right? And that's what we need here. And as I said, getting rid of good density, like we have here, in a beautiful spot, only makes you now displace other people. right? And then they get displaced, and then they get displaced. And, you know, we'll hear from people that say, well, the new density rules in Creighton Park will bring us housing. It won't. As we talked about, it will be decades before they do that. And we don't need another bureaucracy of metro housing to now tell us what we need when we should be coming from the bottom, speaking to groups like you and groups that people work with, telling us what they need. That's what we should be doing.
Absolutely. Building what reflects the communities.
Yeah,
that they're
absolutely.
destroying.
Yeah,
So-
and I want to say that word. You said exactly the right word, and people will think it's harsh. Destroying the community. And there seems to be this mad rush for development at any cost. We do have unhomed people, and we do need to help them. But by doing this, we've generated more unhomed people. And worse than that, you know, I'll say this, that if somebody hates you, that's one thing, and you can deal with it. When somebody likes you, that's a wonderful feeling. But the feeling I get from this council is, we just don't care. And that's worse. The apathy is worse than being hated, where it's just like, oh, well.
I get that was reflected in a lot of our neighbors when we spoke with them, and I think, you know, Dartmouth, I was told when I moved here, is kind of like New Brunswick. It's the drive-through town while you're in Halifax.
Yeah.
I think Ocean Breeze is like that too.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's like self-efficacy right through
Yeah,
us,
they
right?
do. They do.
So all of this is helping us to see, and we appreciate you
Yeah.
came out today to talk with us. Is there anything you'd like to tell the residents here? I know you're planning to come knocking on doors.
Oh, definitely. Oh, gosh, I was actually going to ask, like, you know, how do I do that? And you've told me I'll stay away from the empty buildings. I don't think the rats and mice will vote, so I want to stay away from those. But really, I just want to outline very briefly what my plan is for accessible and affordable housing. Where again, you know, my opponent wants to do the up here model. I want to do the bottom, and as I've said, I've conducted the first survey ever of District 5 providers of accessible and affordable housing who are already out there building, right? Indigenous groups, senior groups, folks with addictions, everybody, right? So we now have a list which never existed before. So what we can do is, like they did in Dieppe and Cumberland County, bring all those groups together, and the province can ignore one group, they can ignore two groups, but they can't ignore 20 groups. So they will come, right, yeah, and they will come and talk to us, and we say, well, what can we do fast? That can be done very fast. A meeting can be done in a month, where trying to make this new municipal board will take years. So what I want to do again is I want to cooperate, not legislate, right? And that's how we do it. Dartmouth has very broad shoulders. We're used to helping each other. Why don't we help each other instead of pitting groups against each other? So all I'll say is this, is I know you're discouraged. I know that you feel very apathetic about voting because every level of government has failed you. And there's no way to put a nice sugar coating on that. Federal government has failed you. Provincial government has failed you. Municipal government has failed you. So it's very easy to get discouraged and feel like you have no impact on your lives. All I can say is that you might be able to stop this happening to someone else. And that's not much solace for you. I know that you would rather have your homes in your community, but at least we can make sure that this doesn't happen to other modest income people like us.
Thank you very much, Mike. It was really nice to meet you.
It was very nice, folks. Just vote. Just vote for somebody. Thank you so much.
Awesome.